What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Raptors Report. It's time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because it seems like they are going to be moving a lot of different pieces, and we got some new reports suggesting about what players they may be looking to move come trade deadline. So I'm going to be discussing all of that in today's video. So if you're ready to watch, make sure to give this video a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that would be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel, and the shout out for today's video goes out to D Nile. So D Nile, thank you so much for supporting this channel and also for helping me pronounce your name because I know I've mispronounced it in previous videos. So thank you so much for supporting this channel. Now let's get into today's video discussing what the Raptors may be looking to move come trade deadline. Now, Basketball on X was reporting that the Toronto Raptors are open for business. Everyone except for Barnes quickly and Barrett is on the table. If they can turn any of their vets, Trent, Dennis Schroeder, Chris Boucher, the newly acquired Bruce Brown, or perhaps even Pirtle into picks or prospects, that would help push their rebuild forward. It's hard to see them passing that up. Now, this shouldn't really come as a surprise to a lot of fans, given, what the moves we've seen with the Raptors make in recent weeks and even a month ago with OG and Anunoby. It's quite obvious that the Raptors are building around Scotty Barnes, and they've also got some good young pieces in Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett as well. Now, of course, the Raptors, a team like them that is going to want more assets, that is going to want more picks in the future. This is a great opportunity to sell because with the plan, what this essentially did for a lot of teams that wish to buy is made it that much more difficult. It's given a lot of teams around the NBA that may be 11th position the possible chance to still make the play-in tournament and even have a crack at the 8th spot in the playoffs. So this essentially makes it very difficult because now you only have a handful of teams that are looking to sell for sure, whereas in the past, top 10 teams, maybe a 10th place team may be looking to sell with the idea that they're very unlikely to catch up to the 8th place team. But obviously with the play-in, that changes a lot different. And if there's ever a market to sell, it is now. A lot of teams will be looking for veterans like Dennis, like Siakam, and even Chris and Gary Trent as well. So let's talk about some of these players individually and what the realistic expectation should be for the Toronto Raptors if they are to expect a trade to occur soon. Now, let's start with Dennis first. I'm not going to touch too much upon statistics. I mean, he is someone that's making around, when you look at the salary cap here, about $12.4 million and $13 million next season. He's about 30 years old, but what he would provide for a lot of playoff teams is good veteran leadership off of the bench. Any team will tell you that bench players are just as important. Obviously, the starters, yes, your top 5, top 6 players are important, but you always need that 6, 7 man off the bench that can provide some leadership, provide some veteran leadership for a lot of teams, and also really good quality play. Like Dennis, you could make an argument he would be a starter on a really bad team. I know, guys, kind of ironic. I know the Raptors are really bad at the moment, but you know what? They've got Emmanuel Quickly, who they're going to invest into the future with. But he would definitely be a starter on a bad team. And I think with Dennis, he's one of those players that can come in. He's a good passer. He can attack the basket. He's someone that knows his role, and he's done a wonderful job ever since the Raptors have decided to trade OG Anunoby and bring Emmanuel Quickly onto this team. He's kind of done that wonderful job coming off the bench. He's been a spark for them off the bench. He's been providing leadership, getting a lot of their players involved. And like I said, he can put up points as well. So he's one of those players that's on a really reasonable contract. When you see some of the money that is being dished around in the NBA, you can definitely see Dennis being a really good player for any team. And he's not too expensive. So, of course, the concern for a lot of playoff teams is that second apron tax, which no team wants to go into. But again, Dennis isn't very expensive. He's not making that much money, so you can essentially throw a filler, maybe a heavily protected first-round pick, kind of similar to what the Miami Heat did with Kyle Lowry, right? Except for that you're treating the better player in Dennis. Maybe you take on a bad contract for another season or so and you get a first pick in return. Again, I know Masai has this reputation of being a really tough executive to deal with, but if you're giving a first-round pick that's, let's say, 15, top 20 protected, that's a fairly decent deal for the Raptors. I think that's what the expectations should be. I don't think you're necessarily going to get a good young player in return for Dennis, but you never know. Never say never. We'll see how desperate teams are. Let's talk about some of the other players, and Chris, Gary, and especially Bruce Brown. Now, Gary Trent is a very funny player because, he's gotten the opportunity to finally kind of get that starting role chance with, Pascal now gone. And, you've got so much opportunity there to kind of showcase what you have, and not to mention he's in a contract year, not to mention he is someone that is looking to make $20+ million. He's also very young as well. But besides his three-point shot, his game hasn't necessarily grown with the Raptors, and I cannot emphasize on this enough. I understand that some players have a limit as to how much they can grow individually, but with Gary, it seems like there's not been a marginal difference in his offensive or defensive game over the last few years. I know he had that one season where he's getting a lot of steals, but the difficult part for the Toronto Raptors right now is, do you keep Gary Trent Jr. or Is there a possibility he leaves in free agency? Because the market isn't really hot for him right now. He has been struggling this season. He's averaging really, really bad in terms of statistical wise. The last few seasons he was doing much better, but this season he's really been struggling. So I'm being very truthful when I say this. I don't even think you can get a first round pick. It might be a top 25 protected. That's probably the first round pick you'll get, and that's not a very attractive offer for Gary Trent. Again, he's a young player. We know he can play a lot better, but you've got to question, right? Like, how is he going to fit into this team moving forward? Money is going to be a big concern because eventually you're going to have to pay Scotty Barnes. You're re-signing Emmanuel quickly as well. So you've got to wonder, maybe 2 second-round picks is the maximum I could see, maybe a salary filler as well. But again, the question is, the Raptors never sell low on their players. This is something we've known for years. And I want to use a player as an example, which was Terrence Ross. He was struggling with the Raptors for a few years, and he had the spurt of 10, 15, 20 games where he played really well, and the Raptors turned Serge Ibaka into Terrence Ross. They made that trade with the Orlando Magic, and eventually it did pay dividends as Serge Ibaka was a key player in helping the Raptors win the championship. So I think it should be a similar case with Gary. It's difficult to say because you have to get an idea as to what Gary would want in free agency. You're not paying him $20 million with the way he's performing, but also you have to take into consideration teams like the Pistons, teams with salary cap out there may just want a young shooter that can shoot the three-point ball really well. Maybe they're willing to throw 20, 22, $23 million out there. So that's always the risk with the Raptors and losing some of the free agents. So that's a decision they'll have to make. In terms of Chris Boucher, just quickly taking a look at his salary here as well. He's a very strange player because he's 31. He's making too much money for his production. $11.7 million, 10.8 honestly is not that bad at all. But you've also got to question what team out there wants Chris Boucher. He's not big enough to play the center position. He's a power forward, but he's not very strong. But he's also a high energy guy, right? So what team is going to give up a lot? I realistically speaking, I think you get a salary filler back for him. I don't think you get any picks. You're very lucky even if you get a second round pick for him. So kudos if the Raptors do manage to squeeze any team out of a second round pick and a salary filler. But it's probably essentially going to be flipping a player that may help you, probably a backup center at this point. I just don't see the Raptors getting a ton for Chris Boucher. And realistically, I just don't think the Raptors may even trade Chris Boucher because I don't see a huge market for him out there. So again, we'll see what happens. But the most important player I do want to talk about on this list is Jakob Poeltl. Now, when people talk about Jakob Poeltl, the first thing they'll mention is his age. He's 28 years old. Taking a look at his salary cap situation here, he's making about $19.5 million, which you could argue, do the Raptors want that contract long term? To me personally, it is not a bad contract at all. He's also someone that's going to have a large market given how teams across the league, when you take a look at a lot of the top teams, even in the Eastern Conference, they all have centers. Boston's got Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford. You got the Milwaukee Bucks, obviously, with Brook Lopez. You got teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers with Jared Allen. And then you got Miami Heat with Bam Adebayo and all sorts of these teams. They've got these big men. And you're going to need it with obviously not one team I have mentioned there. The 76ers got Joel Embiid as well. So a lot of these teams are looking to stop Joel. They're looking to stop guys like Nikola Jokic. And the Lakers have been one of those teams that apparently wanted Andre Drummond, of all players, to potentially match up with Nikola Jokic if they run into him during the playoffs. So there's a need for centers like this, despite him not being able to shoot three-point shots and his free throws at a decent rate. I mean, there's always going to be a market. Now, in terms of the Raptors, I think the smart move for at least this trade deadline, unless you get an offer that absolutely blows you away, I think you need to keep Jakob Poeltl. Reason being, you look at the Raptors' record; they are 1-8 with Jakob Poeltl. Now, a lot of people may be questioning, well, why would you not want to trade Jakob Poeltl? Because the goal of the Raptors should be to tank this season. The goal should not be to win because you want to secure that top 6 protected pick and also next year as well. But if the Raptors do trade Jakob Poeltl, whether it's this season or early to midpoint next season, it is quite obvious why they're doing it. They're doing it because Cooper Flag will be in next year's draft. And again, if the Raptors keep their pick this year, reminder, they're going to have it bottom 6 next year as well. So again, if the Raptors record is this bad with Jakob Poeltl, you've got to question, right? The only reason they tank is because there's guys like Cooper Flag or certain guys you really wish you tank for in next year's draft. But in terms of Jakob Poeltl, I think it's also important to note that you do need to keep certain guys around until you have a decent option that can come in and take his position. Currently, the Raptors do not. Jonte Porter, for me personally, I feel like he's more of a power forward than a center. They obviously have no choice, so they play him at the center position. Thaddeus Young is not a center, guys. Let's be honest. And the Raptors, I think they have to go out and get either sign a center big man or draft one, and then keep Jakob for some time until that big man is slowly able to develop and come along, because you cannot The Raptors have already gone through this. You cannot function an NBA team without a legitimate center, especially given how the big men in the NBA have been dominating as of late as well. So again, I just want to reiterate that I think Jakob is important. Despite his age, he's also on a really good contract. I think you can trade him into the future. It's not something that you have to do at this moment. Like Dennis, you don't want him going into next season. Then you got an expiring contract, and then you only get 2 seconds from him, right? But in terms of Dennis and Gary, I do think it's important for the Raptors to try their best to move off of him because there's a certain player that Raptors have in the Raptors 905 that I'd quickly like to discuss before we end this video. Now, this player is no other than Javon Freeman Liberty. This player is doing an exceptional job at the Raptors 905, as you see there this season with the Toronto Raptors, averaging 24 points. He's shooting not so great from the three-point line, only 33.9%, but he's a good free throw shooter, 81.8%. 7.3 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.4 steals is quite impressive for someone that's listed at around 6'3". He's also only 24 years old. So it's quite important that the Raptors give an opportunity to someone like Jawan, because I want to use a player, for example, that the Raptors used to have in the Raptors 905. Unfortunately, they just never were able to give that player a chance, and that was Gary Payton Jr. Now, Gary Payton Jr., the reason he didn't get an opportunity with the Raptors before the Warriors decided to snag him was because they had Kyle Lowry, they had Fred VanVleet, they had Norman Powell coming off the bench, and they didn't really have room for him. But everyone and anyone could tell you that Gary Payton Jr. was going to be an NBA player at that time. It was just unfortunate. So I think before the season end, and before the Raptors decide to draft players that may fit into the shooting guard slash point guard position for next season, I think it's quite important to see what you have in Javon Freeman Liberty, because he is a two-way contract. And the last thing you want to do is work with him in the Raptors system for this entire season, only for another team to come in and sign him to a 2-year deal. So I think the Raptors have to see what they've got in Javon Freeman Liberty. And also, I really like Kira Lewis Jr. as well. These two guys in particular, I'm really big on. A lot of people may not be big on Kira Lewis, but I think it's important to note that when you talk about point guards, the new age point guards, and how you see a lot of guys like Tyrese Maxey is you see a lot of these guys that are listed at 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", and they're really quick. They're able to attack the basket, and they're able to do a lot of things like that. So I think it's important for the Raptors to see what they have in these two young point guards slash guards, or whatever you want to call them, and to see if you want to bring them back for next season or if you want to let them go. You have to give them that opportunity at the NBA level. And I mean, the Raptors are tanking. What do they have to lose? So I think it's very important to see what happens with the Raptors, but I'm not surprised. And now obviously a new name I forgot to mention is Bruce Brown. I feel like I've mentioned him so much recently, but he's likely going to get traded. There's no doubt about it. I think the Raptors would be foolish to keep him, beyond this trade deadline. He's got a team option. It'll be very interesting to see teams, probably throw out a first-round pick, maybe a salary filler is probably the best they get, but we'll see what happens. Very exciting news, come trade deadline. Obviously, the Raptors have made some moves. Could they make some more? Very likely. So I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And the trivia question for today is, which team was Javon Freeman Liberty drafted by? Was it A, the Toronto Raptors? Was it B, Chicago Bulls? Was he undrafted? C, or was he drafted by the Wizards? D. So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.